Hello, citizens. Great neighborhoods make a great city. Point one of the Great Neighborhoods mission is putting neighborhoods at the center of how we plan and develop the city. And the first step in putting great neighborhoods first is heritage preservation. So let's talk about it during this video. Heritage. There's two things that we need. Number one is we need really good policy that understands exactly what heritage is. So the first thing we're going to talk about is policy. And basically what you have to understand is that most neighborhoods in Calgary, particularly the old ones, have good and bad examples of architecture from 12 decades. And what binds them together is a walkable public realm. And so it's not just understanding what the good examples of architecture are, but it's also understanding how they play together, how there's a relationship between individual buildings and the neighborhood, and the walkable streets and all of those things. And that understanding sits in policy. There's a great planner named Peter Calthorpe. He says there's 3 Ps of classical, walkable, urban architecture, and that's really proportion, so understanding height and scale and how buildings work together to create the outdoor room of our streets. Number 2, understanding that buildings represent the boundary between the public realm of the street and the private realm of the home, and the transition between public and private is a really critical thing to getting architecture right in the context of building great neighborhoods. And then the third P is parking. Automobiles can overrun a neighborhood. A lot of the neighborhoods in this city that are garage-scapes are not the kinds of places that we aspire to live in anymore, because they're basically the triumph of the private realm, the single-family home, over everything else. And great neighborhoods are a balance between public and private, and understanding how we handle parking is really important. So those are the 3 Ps within good policy for heritage preservation. Point 2 are great heritage tools. And so I'm going to write this over here. Tools. And tools are preservation mechanisms that are legal ability, are legal, basically legal tools and frameworks for protecting our heritage character. And the first one that we've pioneered, particularly in the community of Bridgeland, is character home retention. And what character home retention does, I just got to make sure I spelled character right there. What character home retention does is it acknowledges that certain homes hit the 3 Ps. So I'm going to say P, P, P. And certain character homes, especially older homes, are eligible for heritage designation, but it doesn't make economic sense for owners a lot of times to designate their home, because it constricts the value and what they're allowed to do. What a character home retention area does is it says, in this area there are a lot of potential character homes that could become heritage assets in the city of Calgary. We can't stop a private landowner from knocking down their house, but what we can do is maybe incent them to retain their character home. And what a character home retention program basically says is, if you've got a home that meets the standards of a heritage home, we're going to create an environment where it makes more dollars and cents for you to designate that home. So a lot of these character homes sit on RC2 lots, and RC2 allows you to build either a semi-detached or split it into 2 narrow single detaches. We can't stop you from doing that, but what we can do is say, you can do that, or you can retain your character home, you can designate it as a heritage asset in the city of Calgary, and then we give you a multifamily zoning that's very flexible. And so you can take that character home, and without changing its relationship to the street and improving its its character, you can give it a new paint job, you can rehabilitate the original facade, bring it into a heritage state, you can have a basement suite, you can have an apartment on the main floor, maybe an apartment on the third floor and get 3 units, and or you can put a unit over the garage, and all of a sudden where normally you'd be allowed like 2 units, we'll let you have 4 units, and we get a character home designated. That's tool number 1. Tool number 2 is heritage bonusing. And heritage bonusing generally works, heritage bonusing. What heritage bonusing does is it works in areas where we're trying to drive density in the neighborhood, and it works in conjunction with areas where we're trying to preserve character. And so in an area where we're trying to bring density, we say, look, you can build this much density, and we set it at a point where you can make money building the building you're allowed to build. But then we say, if you want to build more, we're going to split the proceeds with you. And you take half of the proceeds for building more, and then the city takes half of that, and it gives you, puts that bonusing into a heritage preservation fund. And that heritage preservation fund can be deployed on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, maybe to helping bring character homes that are designated into their full heritage glory, maybe doing other things. But heritage bonusing is a tool that's on the table, and I'm very excited about it. Another really important one is air rights. So air rights basically says, you know, on a main street, you're allowed to maybe build 6 stories, but we have a bunch of 3-story heritage mixed-use buildings. We would like to keep those 3-story heritage mixed-use buildings, but the owner, it makes more sense sometimes for them to knock it down and build a new building that's 6 stories tall. So what air rights does is it says to the owner, look, you can retain that building and you can sell the air rights to another building. And so that building next to it, instead of building 6 stories, maybe it goes to 8 stories and it buys 2 or 3 stories off of you. You get to retain your heritage building, you get paid for retaining it, and we get a nice pattern of new and old buildings, and the old buildings are retained. The 4th one, which is very exciting and is on the table for the first time ever, is heritage tax bracket. And a heritage tax bracket basically says that if you designate your home or your building, we're going to tax you at a different bracket than normal buildings. And that creates another powerful incentive. Now, of those 4 tools, it's going to work differently on a neighborhood to neighborhood basis. And generally, there's no one tool that's going to work as the silver bullet. Generally, you're going to have to calibrate each tool and deploy it in each neighborhood. And all of them working together is going to create an environment where we get to retain the special architecture that is bequeathed to us by the past and enable a new generation of new buildings that will play nicely with it. The only other thing I want to say is that we used to do heritage 20 years ago by saying, look, if this is what the heritage style of this main street is, every new building has to look like that. And what we've learned over the last 20 years is that you cannot create new architecture with new building science and new materials that looks like the old buildings. They look like dreadful cartoons of the old buildings, and they don't actually make the old buildings pop. And when you build great buildings with the architecture of today, with the materials of today, with the building sciences of today, and they sit next to beautiful buildings from the past, you create a district that makes a lot more sense. So the gold standard right now, beyond any fraction of a doubt, is build the architecture of today and build it right so we can preserve it as living heritage for the future and save the architecture of yesterday and rehabilitate it. And these tools will get us there. I hope, as great neighborhood supporters, I can count on your support as we go from talking about better policy and better tools and taking it to the next level. Gian-Carlo signing off.